Welcome to the BBC World Debate from Delhi. I'm Nick Gowing. Why do women the world over still struggle to enjoy the same status and opportunities as men? Women drive much of the world economy. The clothing in this market is made by women, sold by women and bought by women. Roughly half the global population is female, but that half earns just 1/10 of the world's income. Despite commitments to gender equality, why is change so slow?
I want to become an astromedic. It's a doctor for astronauts.
On one side, I want to become a dancer. On one side, I want to become a poet. And on one side, I have no idea.
A surgeon, international law and business.
I want to become an IFS officer, that's Indian Foreign Service.
An athlete or an artist, like a musical artist, a musician.
These teenage girls at Delhi's modern school are among India's privileged. They can't see why there are barriers to female advancement in the 21st century.
Women are 50% of the population. How can you have any activity that just restricts itself to half the population?
Women can handle homemaking and business at the same time.
I'll give a very famous example of the Indian who's the Pepsi CEO, Indra Nooyi. She's a woman and she's doing fantastically.
You can see women in every field nowadays. They're there everywhere. India is ruled by women.
I always say that just as a chariot moves on two wheels, any nation, any country, if it has to progress, it has, the man is one wheel and the woman is the other wheel. And if both wheels are very strong, the chariot will move very fast.
The latest global gender equality rankings just out from the World Economic Forum show that Iceland has moved to the top with the smallest gender gap. Yemen has not moved from the bottom. The United States is now 31st, India is 114th. On maternity rights and sex discrimination at work, some women in the developed world now concede that legislation can reduce opportunity. The cost can also mean employers avoid taking on women. Here's one of the most successful women in international finance at a British Parliament hearing.
I feel, the women are a really capable, practical, driven, multitasking bunch of people that represent 50% of the financial workforce. And what I really worry about, actually, is that legislation and protections turning us into a nightmare.
This is the Japanese-owned Suzuki Maruti car plant outside Delhi. It remains a predominantly male preserve, on the production line and in the offices. Of 7,400 employees here, 240, that's just 3%, are women. But from the streets of a city like Delhi to the offices of big corporations like this, why is female talent still not being harnessed to its fullest extent? That's our BBC World Debate. More women. Is that the boost of skills that business needs? Well, here at the World Economic Forum's India Summit, we're upholding that principle of gender equality with 3 women and 3 men on the platform. Indra Nooyi is chairman and chief executive of the global food and beverages giant PepsiCo, the biggest company by stock market value with a woman boss. Chanda Kochhar is the new chief executive and managing director of India's largest private bank, ICICI. Ghosn is chairman and chief executive of the auto giant alliance, Renault Nissan, in both France and Japan, regarded as a corporate leader on gender equality in business. Melanne Verveer is President Obama's ambassador for global women's issues beyond US shores. And finally, Suhail Seth, business consultant, social commentator on several corporate boards, skeptic about the role and value of women in business. Welcome to you all. But before I come to you, let me just take a show of hands from the political and business leaders who are gathered here in Delhi. Let me put this question to you about gender equality. Who thinks that business really understands now the principles of gender equality? Any hands going up? I can see, I think I need binoculars to see them. What about those who think that business doesn't understand gender equality? That's why we're doing the debate. Almost all of you think that business doesn't understand gender equality. Gender equality means 50-50. Is that just an aspiration, Carlos Ghosn, or is it actually achievable?
Look, on the long term, it has to be achieved. There is no reason that inside the company you don't reflect the society for which you are preparing your products, your technology, and your services. Long term, it has to be done. Now, when you start at a level where you have a very small percentage, obviously it looks like impossible task. But we have to work as we are going to carry it to the end.
Indra Nooyi.
Achievable, especially in industries like ours, the food and beverage industry. Achievable, and my definition of long term is the next 10 to 15 years. I don't know what your definition is, Carlos, but I think in the next 10 to 15 years, we should strive, and I think it's doable.
Chanda Kochhar, 50-50, is it achievable? Gender equality.
Doable, but with a lot of effort from both the corporates as well as the women themselves.
Melanne Verveer, do you think it's achievable? You're out there campaigning for it on behalf of the United States and the US president.
It has to be achievable. I agree.
That's not the same question. Is it achievable?
It is achievable if we put a lot of will to it, both corporate will and political will.
Suhail Seth, is it achievable? Do you believe it'll happen 50-50?
I don't think so. And in the long term, we're all dead. A. B. What do you mean by gender equality? Is it only indexed to women at work? Or is it the fundamental respect of women by societies? And in many cases across the world, you have certain geographies behaving towards women in different ways. So if you're going to broaden the debate to a serious note, where you're actually going to address the issue of gender equality, which means respect for women, non-discrimination against women, a civil justice system that guarantees women's rights, then I think we would have moved the needle.
All right, you ask a question, Suhail Seth. I'm going to put it to them. Indra Nooyi, what do you mean by gender equality?
Now, what Suhail just said is what stops women from progressing, because that's the man's definition of asking the question and letting this whole thing go by. But let me come back. Gender equality is giving women the opportunity to do whatever they want, okay? Whether they want to study, stay at home, work in any job they want, to me that's gender equality. And the reason we focus on the numbers in the workplace is because we believe that if you gave women the choice, they will come to work, because women like to work. Women like to be productive in jobs which give them a lot of positive reinforcement outside the home. That's my experience because I am a woman, and I think most of the women I've come in contact with like to do that.
Melanne Verveer, of course, you were chair and chief executive of an organization called Vital Voices to campaign for equal women's values. Do you know what equality means?
I think every woman deserves to be respected and to have her rights protected. And in terms of those rights, she has the right to participate economically, she has the right to political participation, she should be able to access health care, education, and be free from violence. And I would say to each man, think about the rights that you enjoy. There is no reason women shouldn't enjoy those same rights.
Equality means everything, as was said earlier, whether it's starting from right to education, right to the right and appropriate health care. But finally, if you talk of workplace, equality means creating an environment which does not discriminate between men and women. I think as long as you create that environment that moves more on the basis of merit and does not discriminate between people just because they are males or females, I think you've opened out a huge set of opportunity for women.
Carlos Ghosn, your enormous auto corporation or alliance has a corporate culture committed to diversity. Your figures show at Renault 16% women, 8% at Nissan. How do you define equality, which you are aspiring to?
Well, my definition of equality is not very far from what Indra said, that I think we need to make sure that women can do whatever they want to do and they are not the victim of preconceived idea, roles that they don't want to play. I mean, this is for me fundamental. And at the end of the day, it's a fundamental, for corporation, it's a fundamental issue because you have so much waste today in talents. Now you're mentioning 8% and the percentage we have.
In Japan.
Yeah, exactly, but you need to understand where we're coming from. I mean, 10 years ago, we had 25% of this level, and we had to put a plan and discuss a little bit and make a lot of trainings and prepare our management to accept this idea so they don't perceive it as, it's a trend or it's a fashion, but it's something fundamental we need to be changed into the company.
Suhail Seth, you must be convinced by that.
Not at all. I think the problem of Indra Nooyi's logic is no one is saying that women don't deserve equality. The point is societies don't all evolve at the same level. Today, the fact that we have inequality in India in many developing economies, in some societies which are matriarchal, only point to the fact that for some reason or the other, blame it on men if you want, the fact is that there is a certain inherent inequality. And don't let the tokenism befuddle or obfuscate. So don't expect the Indra Nooyis and the Chanda Kochhars to be those visible, inspirational tools of a new emancipation for women.
All right, well, let's just clear that. Obfuscation, tokenism, Melanne.
I think one of the problems we have is
do you accept what he says?
No.
Yeah, I don't expect her to.
I mean, I'm sure he likes to see technological evolution just outpace all kinds of stages of development and go from no phone to cell phone without having gone through everything else. That's quite okay. That's progress in our world. But for women, no, we might have to keep some here because it just takes too long to get there.
Okay, obfuscation and tokenism, that word comes up time and time again. Do you believe that in a certain way, he's got a point, tokenism?
I don't think so. I mean, don't use Chanda Kochhar and Indra Nooyi as examples. We don't hold ourselves up as the fact that women are emancipated around the world. And I don't think, Chanda, both of us talking to each other, view ourselves as the token women. We think women are a fantastic force. They're a brain power that's dying to be tapped. And I think business, industry, government has to tap into that workforce and that brain power if the world has to progress. Let's just talk about the future of society. Society is not going to advance the right way until you treat women on an equal footing with men, period.
But there's a view out there that in some corporations, many corporations, all this talk of gender equality is actually the equivalent in climate change of greenwashing. In other words, you're talking about it, but actually you don't really want to do it.
Well, I can jump here. I mean, I don't agree on the fact that you just be passive because this is the way it is and you have cultural. I mean, I moved to Japan in 1999. I was shocked by the fact that most of the women that I was meeting into the company were really demotivated, and I understood why. You know, I understood very well why. So we said, okay, if we sit down and say, well, this is the way society is, and there's nothing to be done, and we're going to wait until the whole society moves, you would be sitting today with the dismal numbers of, I'm going to give you just one statistic. 1% of the management ranks in Nissan in 1999 was women, 1%. I was dismal. Then I looked at the industry in Japan, and the average of the industry was 1%. 1%. So today we are at 5%. 5%. Obviously, 5% is very small. It's fivefold what we used to be. We are at the top level between all the Japanese company industries. But it required a lot of explanation, a lot of trainings, a lot of preparation, introducing women in the succession planning, and a lot of things which were not done. Nobody can sit down on the side and say, you know what, this is going to happen, it's going to be an evolution of society, or I'm going to wait for laws to change. We have to take it as an issue for the corporation and try to solve it, and particularly not show it as it's a fashion or a trend or a belief, but something fundamental for developing value inside the company, and particularly to make sure that all the talent existing is in the company is not being wasted.
Chanda, you've been at the helm of your bank now for 6 months. How far do you believe you can go, or will it be the kind of tokenism that Suhail is talking about?
Well, I don't think it's really tokenism in those corporations that really recognize the potential and the advantage of harnessing women power. See, we have to, one, understand that women are a large part of the population in the world. And whether you look at them as potential consumers, whether you look at them as potential talent pool, whether you look at them as people who can relate much better to employees or to consumers, you need to have them as a part of your work pool. And the moment an organization realizes that, I think the efforts are not just token. They are actually actual efforts. Now, if you look at the case of ICICI itself, you could well turn around and say that, is it tokenism? Because ICICI does not do any reservation for women. And we actually believe that there's no requirement for doing reservation for women. But on the other hand, the big thing that we do is really create a meritocracy, create a culture which is based on merit, which allows both women and men to prosper just on the basis of their merit without discriminating between men and women. And I think that's not tokenism. That is the actual effort to let women grow and prosper.
The realities, Nick, are the following. A, gender equality, and I'm saying this with grave seriousness, please don't imagine that only those women who work are liberated, or only those women in the workplace are people who are independent. There are millions of women who contribute as much being homemakers, and I'm not being derogatory because I know the repartee will be, oh, so you don't want them working either. The point is don't equate gender equality only to workplace, equate it to a more fundamental level, which is the respect within society of women. And various societies, as I said earlier, behave differently. The fact that in India we don't have a civil justice system which protects women, the fact that in America, from 2004 till 2009, you've only seen an 8% increase of women in corporate boardrooms. The fact that Eileen Lang of Catalyst says that men are dizzy, women are dizzy, but no one has the straightforward answer as to why there aren't enough women in positions of leadership, means that there is a problem which we also need to address.
Is there steam rising among the rest of the panel at the moment, Melanne?
And there clearly is a problem, but part of that problem, this is not an academic discussion. This is not a fun discussion just to have it. If we truly understand the data, we're here at the World Economic Forum. It puts out an annual competitiveness report. How are we going to be more economically productive? How are we going to compete within our countries? How are we going to bring prosperity to our countries? It is contingent on this discussion, what this discussion represents, which is equal participation for women in health, in economics, in education, and in political life. If we do that, we will reach a point that will benefit all of our countries, because there is no progress unless women can also progress.
Indra Nooyi, is the steam rising with you?
Yes and no. I mean, I've heard these arguments so many times before. So here, let me just stop you right here. I've talked to a lot of housewives in India, people who've stayed at home, and if you ask them, I'd say the preponderance of those women want to work, or at least want to have the choice to work.
Absolutely.
They want to have the choice. The problem is society does not give them the choice, okay? If you gave them the choice and they chose to stay home, but then if they anytime wanted to get to work and they could, then there's equality. Absolutely. Because they've had the education, the work skills to go back to work. If you take all that away from them, and then you come here and talk about the fact that they're being respected because they're at home, to me, that's not equality.
See, this is again where the logic is being tweaked. No one is saying that don't give women the choice. Please don't consider us to be women bashers. That's not the argument. The argument is, do we take serious efforts to change the modicum in the manner in which women are treated, whether in the workplace or not? A. B, you have international statistics in America, in Europe, to suggest that there is discrimination against women of childbearing age at the workplace. There is envy within small businesses and colleagues against women because, of maternity leave issues. These are real issues. Now, we can sit here and say, oh, but we want equal rights. Of course we want equal rights. I mean, this country, more than anything else, understands the role that women can and must play.
Yeah, but you see, I think respect cannot be passive. It has to be active.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And you cannot just, if women in a certain society, you're not expecting anything and they're not being educated, etc., and tell them, are you free to make choices? Obviously, you're going to be disappointed with the answer, but and a lot of them are being maybe happy with the condition. You need first to prepare women to be able to make this decision, which is starting with education. Expectation is very important also, because if you start with having a different kind of expectation, you're going to have different results. So I think respect has to be active, it cannot be only passive.
Chanda.
Well, I think, again, it's not just stopping at the management boardrooms. Yeah. Let's just go down further and see. In India, again, a lot of change is happening at the villages itself. There are more and more women who are participating around the panchayats, who are then driving decisions that impact the villages for the benefit of not just women, but for the society at large. They take up issues like banning drinking. They take up issues like basic sanitation, healthcare, education, and so on. So we are seeing movement taking place at the other levels itself as well.
Here we have 3 very senior corporate executives and an ambassador for women's values. The fact that almost all the audience believe that business doesn't understand gender equality. You're sitting here, you're advocates, you're ambassadors for it, but they don't understand it.
And I believe that that's true, because we still don't appreciate that this is no longer a matter of nice corporate social responsibility, nice things to do. If you want to bring the women into the workplace, this is a business imperative today. It's an economic imperative.
But how are they going to understand it better?
We all have to figure out how we're going to come together, 1, on understanding this, and 2, on implementing it and taking the steps necessary to move forward. The women that are in the fields, bent over, collecting the firewood and getting the water and knitting countries together by virtue of what they do every day, want to have a better life. Every single woman wants to have a better life. That's a common human trait. But she has to be invested in.
You know, if I was in the audience and you'd asked me that question, I probably would have put my hand up and said, I don't know what gender equality is. Business does not understand it. The reason is because the notion of gender equality is a very complex topic. Is it numbers? Is it getting to 50-50? That's gender equality? Is it having the right environment within the workplace to create a friendly environment for women? Is that equality? What is gender equality? I don't think it's an easily definable subject. And I suspect a lot of the people who put their hands up because they still don't have a clear idea of what it is, because it's very hard to define.
Let me put it to you. Do you think you've been a better chief executive at PepsiCo than a man would have been?
You know, 3 of my board members in the audience, you should ask them.
I'm asking you, because there's this issue of risk. There's a feeling that actually women would have been much better when it came to the recent economic meltdown. There'd have been restraint. Would you have felt within your bank that women can act in a more responsible, less risky way in a corporate environment?
I believe it's more the person who is a good leader or not a good leader and doesn't really come from whether you're a male or a female. And that's really the belief that all organizations should work with. But I think for women, some qualities come very natural. That is, they are able to put themselves in the shoes of others and think what that person would want. So they are able to put themselves in the shoes of their employees and think much better as to what the employees want. They are able to put themselves in the shoes of customers and think what the customers would want. So I think that's a natural trait that probably helps women more. But frankly, finally, it's really the question of how good or bad a leader you are.
If you are a chief executive or on a board, you've got to take risk with the approval of your board and return money and value to shareholders. That means taking risk. Isn't there a contradiction here? Does it matter if it's a man or a woman? Indra?
Well, I think it's a question of careful risk or understandable risk as opposed to risk that's, mired in obfuscated facts. So I think it's 2 different kinds of risk. I think to what Chanda said, again, it depends on the person. It doesn't matter whether it's a man or a woman. And when it comes to PepsiCo itself, I am the 5th in a long line of great CEOs. So any one of them were equally good. So.
But the issue of risk, I mean, do you think you take more or less risk than, say, a man might?
I take the right kind of risk that the company requires at this point in time.
Chanda?
Same here. I take the right kind of risk because there has to be a risk-return equation. And you can't take no risk, then you won't return money to your shareholders. So you have to arrive at the right balance. And again, as I said, I think that right balance can be arrived at by either a man or a woman. It depends on what kind of a person you are.
Carlos? Risk.
Yeah.
Do you take more risks than a woman would take in your position?
Look, I don't want to fall into this trap of saying, okay, if it's risky, it's a man. If it's not risky, it's a woman. I think we are.
But there's plenty of evidence, and there are plenty of claims on the record out there from leading analysts of gender equality who say that when it comes to risk, women would be more responsible. I don't know how they define it, but more responsible.
Look, it's possible, but let me tell you one thing. First, when you're talking risk, you're talking about big decisions. Big decisions usually are not taken by CEO alone in their room. They are taken with the board. And as long as you are surrounded with the board, who, with men and women, with the younger people and older people, because let's not limit diversity to women. We're talking about age, we can talk about culture, we can talk about everything. As long as you have a balanced board, well, then you're going to make more sensitive decisions for your company. But obviously, if you have a board which is in one direction or made was one single population, a board of women, in my opinion, would be as, in a certain way, dangerous for the company than a board only made of men of a certain age. I think you need diversity. You need people of different sensitivity, different knowledge in order to get to the right decision.
That's exactly right. I mean, you could say, as some have, that the global financial crisis came out of too much risk-taking, and mostly men were involved in those decisions. Is that a fair thing to say? I don't know. But it is true that when we have greater balance, greater representation of experiences, greater differences of talents, we're going to get a better product in the end. And that's what I think we should strive for.
I see a bit of skepticism from the way you looked at me when I made that point. Let me just quote to you Jacqueline Zehner, first woman bond trader to be a partner at Goldman Sachs, now vice chairman of the US-based Women's Funding Network. She said, female-managed investment funds have outperformed other funds. Now, there's plenty of evidence and plenty saying that. Suhail Seth.
Yeah, but there's also the same people who've said that because they are less of risk takers, and I don't know if that's true or false, but the fact is that they are more conservative. But having said that, let's just stress on one of the critical points you raised about risk-taking capacity. Freud and before him Shakespeare said of women that they're more compassionate, more reasoned, and they have a more holistic view of life, and which also translates into the workplace. I think the debate will fall if it's a debate between the pros and cons of men and women. I think the larger issue is, how do you react with reality when you have female infanticide in many countries, when you have literacy not being a task that is pursued? The reality is, what are the things that you're going to put on the ground? How are you going to actually change the way people behave? And here my point, Nick, is unless you change the way people think in their basic unit of society, which is the home, you will never be able to expand it manifold in the workplace.
Well,
so the change, may I just finish? The change has to happen at that very basic unit level. And in many societies, they don't want it to happen.
I think there's an inconsistency in this argument because at base, dealing with female feticide, dealing with illiteracy, dealing with neglect, these all say something about respect for women. Work, the ability to participate in work that gives one dignity, that enables women to come out from the constraints in which they find themselves. This ennobling environment that you're describing has not always been so ennobling. That is part of this movement. It is of a whole. The right to participate economically goes hand in glove with the right to have your dignity respected.
What about the issue of the correlation between greater gender equality and greater production, greater GDP? Do you accept that when you look at your Japanese experience versus your French experience?
There is no doubt. No, there is no doubt. For me, there is no doubt. I can demonstrate it at the level of my industry. You know, I can demonstrate it on specific facts that you do better product when you involve more women into the decisions.
Why is that? Why is that?
Do you want me to give you example? Very simple. Women and men don't buy the car on the same features. They don't. They don't. We have statistics. We know it. You know, men go look at the engine, at the transmission, at the power, at torque. Women don't care about it usually. You know, they care about the design. They worry about quality or functionality. They don't look at the same thing. So if you have only men making decision on the car, they're going to take care of the engine, of the transmission, of the torque, and they're going to neglect design and saying that these small stuff are not important. At the end of the day, you end up selling the cars very well for men and not for women. And all the people who understood that are coming with much less investment in engine and heavy stuff, doing the very good interior design, etc., and having big hits, you know? So what I'm doing in the case of Nissan, we're bringing more women in the design, we're bringing more women in deciding into the products, and frankly, all the products which benefit from it are bigger hits. So here I can demonstrate on very specific issues in our industry that women input, women decision in terms of management is going to enhance your sales.
Let me just enhance what Carlos is saying. Today, the world is so complex, the issues are so many. Businesses struggle to really grow in a sustainable way in today's world. We want to be able to draw from the best and brightest that society has to offer in terms of an employee pool. You don't want to eliminate 50% of the population and say, I'm only going to draw from one half of the population, because there's not enough of the best and brightest in one half to feed all the needs of all the companies. We want to be able to draw from the entire population base and draw the best and brightest into the company. And I think if you have women and men to draw from, the company does better because you've drawn from the best and the brightest.
Do you accept this argument, the correlation, Suhail Seth?
Yeah, I do, because you know, as Carlos mentioned, there are definite advantages in adding both to the consumer and the talent pool. But you will only add to that consumer and talent pool once you make the facilities equal for both genders. And sometimes there are societal mess-ups, there are systemic errors which prevent that from happening. So the answer is not what Melanne said, oh, but you know, there's an inconsistency in the argument. No, there is complete consistency in the fact that certain societies are in denial about the contribution that women can make.
Look,
and that needs, one minute, you know, I didn't interrupt you. That needs to change to my mind.
This is gender equality.
And when that does, absolutely. And when that does, then things may improve. But you know, no one is saying that women shouldn't have the right to.
No, can I just say, because I don't disagree with that point.
Oh.
I think that, no, the point is that we do have to invest in women's education and women's growth and well-being, and it is the predicate for moving up the economic ladder. But there are a lot of people who don't have the changes in the economic sphere who are not participating in putting pressure on political decision makers, their own situation of power in a society to make that kind of change go forward. We all have to be part of this change.
You know, Nick, I'm very optimistic about the evolution. I'm going to tell you why. It's not only because objectively you can demonstrate that it's a logical thing to do, but at the same time, you know, when you come to every single man, okay, let's say women are convinced that they need to progress. If you come to or a single man, every man has a mother, every man may have sisters, and every man may have daughters. So when you look already at the women surrounding you, and you take a look about, do they really have equal opportunity? Are they having a fair chance versus their brother or their cousin, etc.? Well, you come to the conclusion that there is something need to be done. This is not only about a rational approach, it's also a very emotional approach which touches every single man on the planet, no matter where, from what society is coming from.
Let me get a few other views from the audience. Rajvi Pathi, you run a sugar mill down in Tamil Nadu.
I do agree with Indra and Chanda when they said that the balance sheet is gender insensitive. Ultimately, it's the success of the business. It's not about who's running the business or taking the leadership, man or woman. But then, how do you get to that point, to be becoming a woman leader? It's a matter of having the opportunity and the courage and the guts. But then again, I do agree with Suhail that the social fabric has to change. The big question is, do we want reservation? Is that also sort of treating women in a derogatory fashion? But then it opens up these tremendous opportunities for women in the country.
I believe that one of the ways in which we can accelerate our progress in closing the gap in opportunities between men and women in the workplace is by holding companies accountable for their progress in this area. And this means for companies to systematically measure their performance in gender equality and report on their performance.
I think that when we talk about gender parity, the one thing that we start with obviously is the rights of girls and women. But if we don't include the rights and responsibilities of boys and men, we're only hitting at half of the issue. So what I'm hearing is that there is full agreement, the recognition that you only have half a society if you only engage half the society, right? That's an obvious point. That you're missing out commercially, you're missing out socially, missing out morally if you are not engaging women. But how do you engage? And I think the key issue is about what is the appropriate level of intervention and how do you address the cultural barriers? India is a fascinating example because actually we are many worlds in one. We have the largest number of elected women parliamentarians at the panchayat level and at the national level of any country. And yet we have the largest number of illiterate women. So what are we doing to invest in basic things like sanitation, healthcare, education? If we focus on that 60% of the population, the remaining 40% of the population will take care of itself.
Let me go now to Vijay Mallya. You run Kingfisher Airline, you run Team India in Formula One, the Grand Prix, and many other businesses, particularly in alcoholic beverages. Are you convinced on gender equality?
I am convinced, but with a couple of caveats, if I can share these with you. On International Women's Day, we dispatched the first Kingfisher Airlines Airbus aircraft with an all-woman crew, from the commander to the first officer and all the cabin crew. In Kingfisher Airlines, we have a policy that all our cabin crew are ladies. Now, coming to Formula One, yes, there is a rather talented young lady driver in the Indy series, but we haven't seen a real quick Formula car driver in Europe or anywhere else in the world. But
are you suggesting you may be breeding, and I don't mean that literally, but you, within Formula One, are creating the first potential woman Formula One champion?
You know, Formula One is all about marketing, advertising, and visibility. And if I were able to identify a lady who would be a Formula One driver, I mean, I would get returns on investment manifold. But coming to, you know, the spirits business, my core business, I have great young ladies, at the back end doing marketing and stuff like that. But I don't think that we're quite ready for, a lady to show up selling a bottle of whiskey.
Let me pick up, finally, on this issue of costs. We heard Nicola Pease, who is Deputy Chairman of Hambro Capital Management, sitting in front of the British Parliament saying this is becoming a nightmare for companies, dealing with sex discrimination problems and equality and the cost of maternity cover and maternity leave. She was saying that in the British Parliament, and a nightmare for women as well. Do you accept that as chief executives who have to look after and handle this issue in major corporations? Indra Nooyi?
No, I don't accept that because we handle it quite well. 30% of our management is represented by women, 25% of the entire employee base, and we have about 200,000 people are women, and we handle the cost just fine. And as a company, we're a high-performing company, and we're a world's leading food and beverage company, and we got that way because of our people. So I don't accept that at all.
A nightmare, Carlos Ghosn. Do you sense that from your employees on this issue of women who go off for up to a year for maternity leave and jobs left open and so on?
No, usually,
she's using that language.
No, usually, inside companies, people can use this whenever they don't want certain things to happen. But frankly, I don't think it's very serious because, you have to look at it at broader perspective in your company about what more equality and more participation from women is going to bring to your corporation. And then after this, whenever you have outlined what is the price, how much value is going to be created, the rest of it is frankly not very important.
But how much do you think she's actually reflecting the whispering that goes on? It's politically incorrect to say that kind of thing. How much is she reflecting that?
Some of it is true because it's not all easy. I'll just give you one example. We had a female employee who wanted 6 months off to take care of an ailing mother. And when she was off for 6 months, we had to redistribute her work to the people around her because we couldn't replace her for a 6-month sabbatical. Around her were other women who came to see me and said, look, we can't take on any more of the workload because...
Were they resentful?
They were not resentful. They were just explaining that they couldn't take on any more of the workload. So I think what corporations have to do is find creative solutions. We are exploring whether we should create a roving workforce which goes around filling these temporary jobs, whether it be men or women. It's not just women who want time off. Men are increasingly asking for time off.
But it raises the question of political correctness here and against the cost within a corporation.
It is cost-benefit analysis, but there are a lot of benefits. They're not just the cost side. And I think it is one of the big challenges for the workplace.
Do you accept the word she used of nightmare?
No, I don't accept that. But I do think we have to be more flexible in enabling women to participate in the workforce and bring all the benefits that their participation represents and still be mothers and have their children taken care of in ways that has a strong, positive societal value. And there's no reason why we can't make the two balance out.
May I offer yet another contrarian but logical point of view? Contrarian. It doesn't happen and it doesn't affect the Pepsis and the ICICIs of the world, nor does it affect Renault. Ask the small and medium enterprise business owner. Ask the small business owner if this is an issue, and the reality is it is. If that can be obliterated, if that can be removed, then we will make even more fantastic progress.
It's a part of your business model which you have to build in. So, well, for small businesses, there are less number of people, you have less flexibility. For large businesses, there are a large number of people, but the challenges are larger. For example, in our case, 80% of our women employees are less than 30 years of age. That means we have to plan for their maternity leaves, we give them adoption leaves, we give them child caring leaves. But at the same time, many of these are humane efforts. So when we have creches take care of children, not just of women employees, but also of men employees. So I think if you plan it well, you can manage these costs. And Nick, I would just for a moment go back to women participating. Well, one viewpoint, which is of course very valid, is to say that as you have more women, if you ask Carlos, if you have more women designing cars, what you would get is actually a car which has a place for a handbag, which means cars will sell more. So I think that's the first point. But the second point is the more women participate in employment, that creates a huge multiplier effect on the growth of the economy.
Carlos Ghosn, again, this question of it being a cost and, quote, a nightmare. Is that the way you see it behind closed doors, sometimes within Renault Nissan?
No, first, I mean, talking about nightmare, frankly, I think it's mightily exaggerated. What's the average child per woman today in a society like Japan? Okay? 1.5. Okay, so we're talking about a career of 40 years where once or twice in the career, you're going to allow somebody to be absent from the job a couple of months. What is this? I mean, this is a minimum that you accept to get somebody who feels good about his company, her company, good about the job, etc. And let me add one thing. Why don't we cancel this by adding a paternity leave? Because this is the way to cancel it, because there is absolutely no reason that we give today some time for the mother. Obviously, physically, she has to be there, but even the father has to share also in this responsibility. And by adding or in some countries, starting by adding a paternity leave, it will eliminate definitively the question of cost. Because then, if you're a father...
But the paternity leave only if the man's going to take care of the child when he's on vacation, not to go play golf.
No, I agree. No, I agree. No, paternity... No, I agree with you. Yeah. I agree with you. But I think in a certain way to encourage people, to take care, because this is a real issue in some societies about the fact that the family cannot be only single-handedly carried by one person, but has to be shared. I mean, we are trying and we are encouraging paternity leave for people who would like to do it, and some people are asking for it. If you make people guilty about it, we have a problem. We should encourage it.
We're talking about big corporations here. Malini Mehra, what about the small businesses, the tens of thousands, the millions, who face the challenge of how to accommodate gender equality?
I think there is a dilemma, obviously. The large companies have much greater assets. You're able to invest in this. You look at this not as a cost, but as a long-term investment. I run a small business. It is an issue. But how do we deal with it? Because we plan for it. In my organization, 80% of the workforce is female. And we know that the majority of us are actually in our childbearing years. I have 3 children. I have, offices in 2 different countries. The way that I deal with it is to make sure that we have flexible childcare and to make sure that my husband is an equal partner in raising our children and doing the family chores. So when I said earlier that you have to talk about boys and men, it's about how we are raising our boys and men. Why don't we raise our boys to be mothers? That is what we should be doing. And take out the sting, the cultural sting, that boys cannot be raised to look after the home and also to be successful in the workplace. That's the future. The future is female, and we need to raise our boys to have the same degree of emotional quotient that we're currently investing into intelligence quotients.
Do you think if you were raised at this time, Suhail, you'd take a more enlightened view?
Well, I'd love to be a mother. I have no issues with that. See, you're getting... It's the wrong end of the stick.
No, but that's a very important point.
No, but, raise boys as mothers and all that.
But your mindset is of the past.
No, but my mindset is equally liberal. I mean, just because I'm mouthing certain logical realities doesn't mean that I hate women. I love women passionately. And I think they can contribute and do contribute a lot, and I'm not being condescending. All I'm saying is, unless you get rid of the systemic errors in various societies, not just India, you will not achieve real balance of gender equality, and that must be mired and anchored in gender respect.
Melanne Verveer.
I agree 100% with him on that,
because
it goes...
I can now kiss you.
We're good buddies. It goes to what Maura said, which is we've got to make these investments, and we all have to be part of the solution. And that means when there's violence against women, when there's the kind of gross violations that occur, that men need to be a huge part of the solution. Religious leaders need to be engaged. We need all of society to get us to the point where we can have the benefits in the marketplace that accrue from all the talent that women represent, which, if not unleashed, will not give us the kind of economic growth we all want to see. So we need to make those investments.
And at times we may change the format of religion also. In India, the mess lies in some of the mythological stories that we follow. I mean, the treatment meted out to Sita, for instance. So there are certain sociological realities that we must also come to terms with if we are to bring about change. And I agree with Nicole. If you do an assessment which is balance sheet and performance linked, and you have measurement, hopefully we'll be a better world.
In these final moments, we have 2 very senior female executives. Do you relate to what we just heard from Malini on the personal price, the personal challenges? You're at the top of a company with children.
Personal challenges are huge. I mean, look, all our resumes look terrific. Each job is an apprenticeship for for the next job. But what's missing in that resume is all the heartbreaks and the regrets and the trade-offs and the pain. But that's part of life. And I think all the trailblazers will, in fact, go through this sort of a painful process. And I think that's par for the course. And at the end of the day, I think people like Chanda, myself, Melanne should view ourselves as the trailblazers and figure out how we can be role models for those millions of young women who are looking up at us and saying, God, I wish I could be like them, like the lady on the young girl on the tape said. But we have to make sure we bring more women into the workforce, we allow more women to dream big, and they in turn can pull women up behind them.
Chanda, have you shared that pain as well?
Of course, it is definitely a challenge because finally, as a woman, you're trying to maybe out of a 24-hour day, you're trying to get a 48-hour work done. But I think the moment you desire to do it yourself, half the pain is behind you because you are desiring to do it. And the second is you need cooperation from the family as well. But as things move on, I think if you've desired to do it, you look back and really enjoy the whole process. And I think in a way, I take it as being woman as a privilege rather than being a challenge. I think it's only a bigger privilege than men of being able to do both, raise a family as well as run a job. I think that's a fantastic privilege, which 50% of the population of the world misses out.
It absolutely came from Sue herself. We have enlightened, but on the other hand, clearly there is much work to do. Can I thank you for your frankness about this very complex issue, but an issue which is so vital for business, for economic outlook, and also for both genders, whether women or men. From me, Nick Gowing, here in Delhi, thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.